Now, in Parliament this week and next week, the government has plenty on the agenda. We mentioned the foreign fighters legislation we've been discussing this week, the drought fund that it's setting up as well, and that legislation has now gone through. But also, over the coming week, the government is hoping to pass laws that will include tougher penalties and even jail time for so-called vegan activists, those who raid farms to make their point about animal rights. And with me now is the Minister for Agriculture and the Nationals Deputy Leader, Bridget Mackenzie. Thanks for your time this afternoon. So this legislation, the farm raids legislation, many have pointed out, isn't this a state responsibility? Don't the states have laws to do with trespass and so on? Why do we need new federal laws?
Well, you're right. States do have jurisdiction over trespass laws and indeed funding the police forces that will enforce any laws around trespass. What our changes to the criminal code go to is the actual incitement of that behaviour online using a carriage service.
So not the actual activists raiding the farms you're talking about?
So at the Commonwealth level, we regulate the use of the internet and carriage services. So if you incite someone online to trespass, you're going to be subject to up to 12 months jail. And if you incite somebody not just to trespass, but to steal stock, to harass and intimidate workers and farming families, you're going to be subjected up to 5 years jail. This is about our government backing people's right to farm. We saw the National Day of Action in April, which saw hundreds of people flood onto family farms right across the country with really perverse outcomes. And the front page of the Weekly Times
today... Well, I think we've got a picture of that, in fact. This was one of those farming families in Victoria that they've now sold up. I think they were free-range chicken poultry farmers, and they've sold up after a raid took place on their property, the final straw, the headline there. So that's the sort of family you're talking about?
Well, that family in particular saw up to 300 of their chickens actually suffocate as a result of this farm invasion, and potential health impacts of the family feeling incredibly unsafe and intimidated on their own property, and left farming. Now, we want to see more people farming, we want to see more jobs in regional communities, and we need to take a tough stand and back our farmers.
Labor's supports, I think it says in principle, but it is worried about genuine whistleblowers and even journalists. Whistleblowers who are bringing to attention legitimate cases of animal abuse, journalists who are reporting on it. Do they have anything to fear? Yeah,
look, we've taken some really careful consideration of those things. We want to see great animal welfare outcomes right throughout our supply chain here in Australia, and we're really confident that we can achieve that. And farmers are often, you know, they're the ones that care about their animals the most. But we carved out journalists and whistleblowers specifically with exemptions in the amendment, which actually make sure that you have to be a bona fide journalist, right? Not just some blogger or some person with a Facebook page funded by animal activists and extremists, and counting yourself as a journalist. And also, it has to be in the public interest. Now, David, you know that journalists aren't inciting people to criminal activity. That's not part of your job. And so we've been very careful to make sure that journalists can still do their job in the public interest, and that whistleblowers can rightfully report incidents of animal welfare issues to the RSPCA and the relevant local authorities.
A couple of other things while I've got you. Q fever. There's a story in the Australian today about the drought raising the risk of Q fever for farmers. It's spread through livestock, kangaroos as well, and other pets, and it can kill. Farmers want the vaccine that is available to be listed on the PBS. Will it be?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really interesting issue to consider. You're right, nearly 300 Australians contract Q fever in any given year. And Seqirus, the actual company that we provide significant funding to produce and supply the Q fever vaccine and the test kits, plus to ensure they manufacture here in Australia in case of an influenza epidemic, etc., hasn't actually applied to the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee for listing on the PBS,
so they need to do that
or
first.
Listing, on the National Immunisation Program, which wouldn't mean it's just subsidised, would actually mean it would be free. I don't know, and I think I would be encouraging Seqirus to, particularly for our farmers in drought right now, and particularly the low number of Australians that actually need that vaccine, to think about putting forward a submission to the PBS advisory.
You're giving a bit of an indication there that should they do that, they'd be looked upon favourably.
Well, that's not my area, right? But the reality is the Health Act needs to have a recommendation from the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee in order to list something. So I'd encourage them to put a submission in.
Newstart. A number of your National Party colleagues are pushing for an increase in the Newstart allowance. Do you think it should be increased?
Look, I think it's incredibly difficult to live on Newstart. That's why we're working so hard to increase job opportunities, not just for us in the Nats in regional communities, but right across the country. We've been, funding regional job hubs in those communities that have particularly high unemployment rates for young Australians, the pathway, etc. We've seen significant job increases thanks to us trying to strengthen the economy, tax cuts to small to medium enterprises.
In the meantime, do you think increased Newstart or not?
Well, I think it's very hard to live on, and what I'm focused on and what the government's focused on is increasing job opportunities.
So that's a no on Newstart?
What it is, David, is recognising that it's tough to live on. It's not meant to be a lifestyle choice. It's not meant to be something you're on for the long term. In fact, 2/3 of Newstart recipients end that payment within 12 months, which is great news. And, even the latest job figures see an additional 20,000 full-time jobs created. So the jobs are there. We've just got to make sure we can get people into them.
Nuclear, just finally, is another one where a few of your National Party colleagues, Keith Pitt, Barnaby Joyce, are saying we need nuclear power. What do you think?
Well, I'm on the public record about what I think, but the reality is
just
our
remind
government...
us, what is your
I think in when you're looking at low-emission energy production, nuclear internationally is something that's been used by a number of nations.
So should we do it here?
No, the reality is, for our country, we have a moratorium on nuclear, and that is going to remain.